Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll begin with chapter 23, verse 32. Chapter 23, verse 32. In Parshas Mishpatim, Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu near the end of Mishpatim. Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu that there are these other nations living in the land of Israel, and ultimately God is going to give the land of Israel to Jewish people, and it will be the role of the Jewish people to drive out the inhabitants of the land of Israel. They're not conducting themselves in the appropriate way. There's idol worship and the like. Okay, now in verse 32, it says, Lo sichros lohem ve'lohehem bris. Do not make a covenant with these nations, nor with their gods. Now, it's probably, if it wouldn't have said anything about their gods, we probably would have gathered that if we're not supposed to make a covenant with the nation, we shouldn't. By the way, we're not supposed to make a covenant with the nation because of their idol worship and the like. We probably shouldn't be making a covenant with their gods either. Actually, if we believe that their gods are not substantive, we can't make a covenant with their gods. So, what is to say that that word is superfluous seems to be an understatement. How about that for strong language? So what's going on with this verse? So if you look at the Ramban, it's a very interesting Ramban over here. Ramban on Pasuk Lamed Beis, Lo sichros lohem ve'lohehem bris. Hizish lo yichros lohem bris la'achayos mehem kol neshama. We shouldn't make a covenant with the residents of the land. We shouldn't let any of them live. It's pretty scary, but that's the instruction being given here. Ve'lohehem. And what it means to say, don't make a covenant with their gods. Don't let that avodah zarah, don't let their idols and arrangements for idol worship stay there. Rather, destroy the idols, destroy the memorials, and the like. So, kill the inhabitants, destroy all remnants of their idol worship. But now the Ramban says something very interesting, and this is something people ask about a lot. V'yitachen sheyomar shlo yichros lahem bris v'melohehem ha'achas. Maybe what it means is you may not make a covenant with them and their gods as one. Rather, the deities have to, or the idols have to be destroyed. V'hakavana lo mart, the intent is to say, Kiba ovdam ovdim es Elohehem lo yichros lohem bris. You may not make a peace treaty with these nations while they're still worshiping their other gods. Aval im kiblu aleim shlo lavod. But if these nations inhabiting the land of Israel accept that they won't worship other gods, that they'll accept Hashem as their God, and presumably by extension they'll accept the Noahite laws, Rasha imzer Rashai hu l'kaimam. You're allowed to keep them around. So this is an interesting thing. Not all the commentaries agree on this, but the Ramban is certainly not the only one who says this. The directive in the Torah to expel or kill all residents of the land of Israel when they go in is only if they still do idol worship. But if they're ready to accept the Jewish God, not convert to Judaism, we're not asking them to convert to Judaism, but if they're ready to accept the Jewish God, again, presumably keep the Noahite laws, then we may live peacefully with the residents in the land of Israel. It's just an interesting, this is the seven nations. It's an interesting Ramban to be aware of. Okay. Chapter 24, verse 5. As I believe we mentioned last week, the end of this parsha sort of loops back to some things going on at the giving of the Torah. There's a lot of discussion in the commentaries as to what exactly the timeline is here. But in any event, Moshe now in chapter 24, verse 5, Vayishlach es na'arei b'nei Yisrael, Moshe sends, literally translated, the lads of Israel, vayalu olos, and they bring offerings, vayizbechu svachim shlomim l'Hashem parim, and they offered up shlomim, korban offerings to God. This, according to many, is before the actual scene of God giving the Torah and Nasav and Ishmael and all of that. This is a precursor according to many. Who are these lads of Bnei Israel? What is their job? What is their role? So if you look at the Ramban on Pasuk Hey, Na'arei Bnei Israel, Heim HaBechoros. Rashi says the same thing. Kedivri Unklis, he's citing Unklis. Rashi says it also, that we're talking about the firstborns from each family. This is it's a really neat thing to think about. If someone were to ask you, when did the firstborns from each family serve in the capacity that would have been their role if there wouldn't have been the sin, because of the sin of the golden calf, they lost their role and it was given over to the tribe of Levi. When, if ever, did they serve in this capacity? So according to Unklis and Rashi, this is the moment that at the giving of the Torah, Moshe felt there should be offerings brought on behalf of Jewish people. So Moshe came to the firstborn male from each family and said, you represent the entirety of the people and you bring these offerings. Okay. The difficulty is, why were they referred to in a language of lads? You could be the firstborn in your family. My father has many wonderful qualities. I'm not sure we would call him a lad. My father is a bechor. My father is a bechor. So why are the bechor? I mean, we didn't say the bechoros under the age of 18 or anything. I mean, we said the bechor. I mean, so why are they being referred to as the lads? So ulai bavur shehiskir haskanim shematzilei bnei Israel kara bechoros narim kim narim connect them. So it could be there's another pasuk in this account that talks about the atzilei bnei Israel. The atzilei bnei Israel seem to be some language of the strong ones, the endowed ones of Bnei Israel. If we have time, we're going to talk about that a little bit also, God willing. So that's understood as being reference to the elders. So he says maybe the reason why I refer to the Na'arim is not because we're labeling the age of these people bringing the korbanos, but rather we're just using the word Na'arim as a contrast to Atzilim. Whereas Atzilim connotes the elders. So Na'arim connotes a group that's selected not because of their senior age. Not that they couldn't have been senior in age, but that's not the defining aspect of the group. So he says maybe that's the pshat. Yirmos, this is Tolutu, kilo bavur ma'alasam b'chachma shalcham, kilo yuzkenim rak me'abachora ki imam kudashim l'korbanos. In other words, that the only qualifying facet for these people to represent the nation of bringing the offerings was their birth order, not their age. And of course, being elders in the Torah means more than whether or not a person is a holder of an AARP card, but being elders is a language of Torah knowledge. So these people weren't necessarily unique in Torah knowledge, but it was just because of how they were born in their families. So that's an interesting possibility from the Ramban. V'derech hapshat, na'arei b'nei Yisrael, heim bachurei Yisrael, shelo toamu tam chet. The Ramban says, but the straightforward meaning of the verse is not that it's the firstborns. It's young men in Klal Yisrael. Why? I mean, you have all these people, you have a whole nation here. Why would you ask the young men? Because they're too young to have sinned in life. So let them represent the people and bring these offerings to God. The point being that they had never, they hadn't been married, they hadn't been sexually involved with someone. In other words, they're the most sacred, because they haven't had that life experience yet. So just a very interesting possible additional shot from the Ramban. Okay. Now, let's go on to verse 9. Vayal Moshe v'Aaron nadav avihu v'shivim ziknei Yisrael. So no, Aaron, Moshe, Aaron, Nadav and Avihu. Remember, Nadav and Avihu are Aaron's sons. We're going to find out more about them later. But of course, Nadav and Avihu were really like the junior leaders of Klal Yisrael. They were great people. And the 70 elders all started going up the mountain. Verse 10, obviously the rest of them, other than Moshe, are not going to go all the way up the mountain, but they kind of went up to a certain spot on the mountain. Verse 10, Vayiru Eis Elokei Yisrael. And this group of people saw the God of Israel. Pasuk even describes sort of what their vision was. Verse 11. To the strong ones of Israel, the great ones of Israel, God didn't extend his hand. And they saw God and they ate and drank. Why should he have extended his hand? What just happened in this pasuk? I didn't skip any psukim. It's difficult to understand the flow. So let's start with Rashi. And why are we talking about what they ate and drank? Rashi and Yudal, it's the people being referenced in the previous pasuk, the people who came up with Moshe, not Moshe, but the others. Lo shalach yodo. God didn't extend his hand. That implies that it would have been fit to extend the hand against them. They saw God. They viewed God, they were looking at him, so to say, with like a haughty attitude. From a spirit of food and drink. So the pshat, according to Rashi, is they're sitting there like, they're seeing this remarkable vision, and they're asking somebody, to pass the challah, and have a drink. And it was not appropriate respect for the moment. So even though these people were great and they merited to see something of God, whatever that means, even, they didn't have the proper reverence for the moment. I want to mention, just before we move on to the Ramban, there's a famous medrash which Rashi cites elsewhere that God could have killed Nadav and Avihu right here. They're part of this group, and he didn't. And they ultimately get punished later on in the whole story in the Mishkan, which ends up being a very similar thing. As they're coming in intoxicated into the Mishkan, not appropriate. Okay, now let's see the Ramban. Ramban on Pasuk Yud Aleph. Be'elat Silei b'nei Yisrael. Heim Nadav Avihu v'askenim aniskarim. Karam kein kinetz alaleim ruach elukim. By the way, the Ramban says the pshat, the word atzilei, which I translated as prominent, strong. Ramban says the pshat, the word is, if you remember, when God tells Moshe, we're going to appoint elders and we're going to impart some of your divine spirit upon them. It says, Vayotzel alehem haruach. Yud Aleph Tzadi Lamed. It's the same shoresh as Atzilei. So they're the ones who were imbued, endowed with the Spirit of God. That's their Atzilei b'nei Yisrael. Lo shalach yato. God didn't extend his hand, says the Ramban. Bavur she'amar v'akonim v'ham al yarsu lalos el Hashem pen yifratz bam. Hudia b'kan shenisaru b'kach v'lo paratz ben paratz. The Ramban says something totally different than Rashi. Ramban says God didn't extend their hand. God didn't extend his hand. Rashi says, wow, so it must be they did something bad. The Ramban says, no, it means they were very careful to deserve that God shouldn't extend his hand against them. The big directive was nobody should come too far up the mountain. So the Ramban says that's what they're doing here in this pasuk. They're being very careful not to go beyond where they were supposed to go. And because, even though they came up a little bit, because they didn't go where they weren't supposed to go, that's why God didn't have to punish them. That's how the Ramban understands it. One more thing, vayochlu vayishtu. Quickly, it's late already. The Ramban says they partook of the korbanos. And what does it mean that they drank? They made a celebration, not in a disrespectful way. They thought this was a remarkable moment. So it's just so interesting. You could have the same pasuk, and classic commentators can translate it so differently. Rashi says these are great people, but they did something terrible by eating and drinking in the moment, utterly unacceptable. That's what Rashi says. The Ramban says these were great people, and they were celebrating the moment exactly as they were supposed to. And the reason it says God didn't punish them in any way, it's because they did it to the T. Very interesting. So that's one thing we discussed this morning. We discussed the Ramban's position regarding the directive to how we're supposed to interact with the residents of the land of Israel when we go in, and we discussed the different possibilities of the meaning of the lads of Bnei Israel who brought the offerings.